good job asking questions. This was fast. I think we're gonna start try to answer most of them. So thank you so much for the TODO Steering Committee Ask Me Anything session. Before introducing our great steering committee members that will be joining us today, some updates on what's going on in the OSPO landscape. For those who are new to OSPOs, into the group we define as any function responsible of the strategic and operational management of open source. There is a lot of controversy about the term, like there's a lot of people that assumes that needs to be a formalized physical entity. Well, OSPOs have been evolving a lot, depending if the organization is a small, medium, or large, that might be changed. So we are seeing informal or virtual OSPOs, and the term also involves that. Thinking it more about dedicated personnel within the organization with expertise in open source, managing open source operations, rather the quantity of people involved in there. So that is how in the TODO group we define this terminology. And in the past years, we have seen also a lot of evolution. OSPOs has been cross-skilling. We are, depending on the OSPO you ask, there might be people specialized in security, other in driving AI transformation into the organization, others focus on compliance with the recent regulations, especially the OSPOs being created in Europe, and so on. So our mission in the TODO group is to identify these policies and processes related to open source management, open source engagements within the organizations through the establishment of successful open source program offices. This community is an open community, and we create tools and educational materials. We have a large organizations endorsing this, and also that established an OSPO and have open source professionals working there to leverage this. We also have lots of resources that has been developed by a community and a passionate community of OSPOers. We have, the recent one was the OSPO book. We have white papers, frameworks, definitions, mind maps, and many, many more. This is not possible without the help of our amazing OSPO local community across different regions. We have an ambassador program, and I wanted to give a shout out to all great ambassadors driving OSPO local communities across different areas around the world. And you can also get involved too. If you're part of an organization and you're interested to become a member, you can also be part of and have your organization endorsing this initiative. You can also, as an individual, become an ambassador, or you can also participate and collaborate in a working group. For instance, to become a co-author of the OSPO book or one of the create a new guide. Working groups are open to everyone. You don't need to be a Linux Foundation member to do so. So yeah, there are different ways to get involved. Another recent resource we developed and we have been developing in the last 8 years is the State of the OSPO Open Source Management in collaboration with Linux Foundation Research, Cloud Native Computing Foundation, FOSS-ID, and FinApps Foundation. This year, we got a lot of interesting insights on what OSPOs are doing to leverage the value in the organization in terms of security, in terms of digital transformation, in terms of upstream contributions. And we have found interesting data that shows how effective are OSPOs in doing when working in these areas. I will share really short screenshots on what we have found on how OSPOs are doing in terms of improving the quality of software and security of the organizations. Also, how are they related to improving open source security, and where exactly in this area are they involved? Also, how some of them are getting involved in AI strategy, and we ask during the research how effective are they being, and we found that the effectiveness have been increased in the past year, moving from 65% of 79%. And what is more important, and I feel is the essence of all OSPOs, they're also being effective in increasing influence within open source ecosystem. And that is another value really important for the organization. So I hope I was quick, and I think we already have a lot of questions. So let's do a round of intros, and then we can move to questions. Let's start with Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley Wolf. I'm at GitHub. I lead our open source programs team. Our OSPO sits within open source programs. We look after the policy, tools, and guidance that we make available inside of GitHub. We also have public-facing resources for other OSPOs. We've shared our tools, case studies, and guides for others to look at in addition to the to-do group resources. I've been involved with to-do groups since early days. I was a long-time lurker. Then I became really interested in building on some of those resources, became a contributor, and I've been elected as a steering committee member for about 4 years now. So started out with wanting to just preview what's going on, but it's a great way to get involved with OSPO if you have one or are growing yours.
All right, my name's Annania Melaku, and I work at F5, and my focus is on NGINX community. NGINX is one of our more prominent open source projects, so we put a lot of time and resources on that. I also worked in the F5 open source program office and previously in the Comcast open source program office, so I've been working in this space for many years. Just like Ashley, longtime lurker in To-Do Group, and also serving my second term on the steering committee with Ashley, so 4 years, I guess now. They're 2-year terms. So happy to be here and talk to all of you.
Hi everyone, my name is Natali Vlatko. I lead the OSPO at Cisco, just a little company you may have heard of. And previously I used to lead the OSPO at a company called Wayfair, where we did a lot with cloud native and same with the Cisco. I'm also a Kubernetes maintainer, so I get to do fun things with open source kind of from both ends, which is a lot, but very, very fun and fulfilling. And regarding To-Do Group, myself and Alice are the newest members in steering, having been elected in the last election, and we are really, really excited to help contribute to this growing community. Also, not only lurking, but generally big-time user of To-Do Group resources very, very early on when I started my OSPO career. And so giving back to resources that helped me grow my own work and journey in OSPO is something that's, again, really, really fulfilling.
Hi, my name's Alice Sowerby. I'm actually not currently in an OSPO, so I'm a freelance technical program manager. I previously was in an open source program function within a company called NGINX, which is, you may know from data centers. Currently, I'm doing project management for the FreeBSD Foundation, which is for the FreeBSD project, which is a Unix-like operating system. I'm also a relatively long-term lurker with To-Do Group. When I got laid off from NGINX, I started getting more actively involved, which was beginning of last year. Decided to do some book editing, ended up being pretty heavily involved with that. And then earlier this year was invited to join the steering committee as a place came up, and I was the first reserve, I think. So I'm also involved with the Chaos project where I co-produced the podcast.
Hey everyone, Stephen Augustus. I am a technical architect in the office of the CTO, specifically the open source program office at Bloomberg, previously head of open source at Cisco. Spent some time with a lot of these lovely folks. Have been lurking in lots of communities, and eventually I think similar journey of wanting to contribute to the things that I was I found useful. So I spend time across Kubernetes. I'm one of the steering committee members with Kubernetes. I run the SIG release, which releases Kubernetes. I'm also one of the technical advisory council members for OpenSSF. So if you want to talk software supply chain security, risk, and some of the things that we're going to get into on the technical side, feel free to grab me afterwards.
Okay, so I think we're gonna go straight through the first question that we get so often in the community. How can I convince management to establish an OSPO if they don't see yet the value of even having an open source policies?
Oh, I've got this answer. There's a really great... He's currently just been appointed the chief economist of the Linux Foundation. His name is Frank Nagel. Frank Nagel and a couple of folks at the Harvard Business School co-authored a really great white paper called The Value of Open Source. And there's a really, really great quote in there that I'm just going to paraphrase, that basically the delivery side value of open source is valued at $8.5 trillion. And the estimate is that companies would need to spend 3.5 times more than they currently are if open source software didn't exist. That entire report is so illuminating about the monetary value of open source specifically, on top of a lot of other valuable things around open source when it comes to open source being a bar raiser for your technical expertise, as an example, which is another big thing that I lean on very heavily within Cisco. But that report is only recently out. I'm happy to share the link with anyone who needs it. I reference it quite a lot. But monetary value is quite often something that organizations fail to grasp, and that report has really crystallized a lot of what many of us knew for quite some time.
So I would say every OSPO journey is different, and it really depends on what company you're working for, what businesses they have. Do they distribute a lot of products? Do they own an open source project that needs active support with community? So it's like, what space is there a gap? And then also solving that problem and filling that gap. So if you distribute a lot of products, then compliance may be the space where you can have that conversation of why you need an OSPO. If you do a lot with security, same thing with compliance. Again, the community, so it goes on and on. OSPOs literally touch every aspect of the business. Like marketing, not a fun word for everyone, but like marketing is also a part of it. Human relations is also a part of it. Public relations is a part of it. Even recently, I've been looking into collaborations with our global compliance and risk team. I've also looked into collaborations with our environmental, social, and governance group, which is a commitment to our investors, right? So it's like social impact as well. So figuring out that space and what your company cares about and aligning to those goals.
So I make this joke every time, but don't start an OSPO immediately, right? Start to get an idea of why it needs to exist, right? Usually the OSPO is kind of the coming together of these forces that live across the org, right? So I think a really good example of internally at Bloomberg, we have something called IPWG, which is our intellectual property working group, right? But more commonly in the industry, you'll see them kind of referenced as open source review boards, right? So it's an opportunity to bring people across from the open source program office, whether or not it exists, engineering teams, legal, marketing, comms, to have conversations about how to execute on either the consumption or production of open source in and around your company. I think, to some of the points that were made, OSPOs are going to take lots of different forms. If you have an OSPO that is, heavily tied to marketing, you're going to see maybe more DevRel flavored, dev advocacy flavored kind of come out of that. If you have it closer to legal, you're going to see kind of this compliance and risk flavored OSPO. If you have it close to like an office of the CTO and engineering group, you're going to see more open source engineers come out of that OSPO than normal. But so it's going to really depend on the kind of business, the people who are interested in open source within your business, but don't immediately form an OSPO. Understand the needs, understand the people that need to be involved, bring them together first so they can catalyze that conversation of creation.
Yeah, I'd add to that. Sorry, Ashley. Reach out to other people in comparable organizations who are already doing it and speak with them. When I was trying to understand more about OSPOs,
To-do group.
yes, honestly, I was getting there. I was building up to it. When I was interested in learning more about OSPOs and the OSPO-like function, I was put in touch with Stephen. We had a lovely Zoom conversation several years ago, and there were various other people I spoke to. There are case studies available about different OSPOs, so you can go find some social proof to show. A lot of people find it much easier to see something actually demonstrated for real. It's social proof. Go and take a look and see if you can find a similar organisation that has an OSPO that has demonstrated the value to that organisation. And of course, start with the to-do group. That's where all these resources are located.
And just wanted to add, one of the expressions I like, I think Gil Yehuda coined it in the to-do group, is fear, love, and money. So when you look inside your organization, your industry, your goals, you could think about fear as what are the risks associated with using open source, the compliance side of it, love, wanting to have brand recognition, use open source for hiring. It's public, it's what you can talk about, it's how you can hire really great talent and see what they're working on in the open, whereas you can't maybe talk about all the rest of the work that you're doing. And then money, sponsorship side. It's another way to gain recognition, to contribute back to open source. If you depend on something heavily in the ecosystem, you can give back to it to sustain it. So if you want a clean way to break that down, as well as looking at open source from how you're using it, how you're contributing to it, and how you're creating it. So in OSPO, we tend to frame it in those buckets.
May I ask, this is completely optional, who asked this question? If not, feel free to just ignore. Okay, because I will give an OSPO book just for you to know. Next question, how do you ensure engineers are following best practices and compliance guidelines when open sourcing a project or when contributing upstream?
For us, we have an open source releases repo. It's an open repo to everybody at the company. We have a checklist we created in an issue template. So we encourage and advocate across the company for new hires, ongoing, that, hey, if you're interested in putting something out there, that's great. We'd love to see it. Please follow this process. It helps to ensure that it's set up in a way that's welcoming to the community. It's following our compliance guidelines. We have a new checklist item now around AI. We have a responsible AI team. So if somebody's working on something around AI systems, we want to make sure it's all okay to put out there and that we're being responsible and thoughtful about it. So we ask folks to register their release ahead of time, and then our team goes through and make sure that they've done all the items and can help connect them with legal, security, or the comms team if they want to publish a blog about it. So we've set that up. It's pretty straightforward with the issue template. We also have that available for others if you want to take a look at what we have set up publicly.
Yeah, so for every new project, we do have to go through a legal review. We also have a template repository in GitHub that has all the standard files that you'd expect to see. We also have a CLA tool for the company, so that can be automated with GitHub. And also my team does do some audits to ensure that our projects are following best practices.
So check out the OSPO book. We have lots of great resources from To-Do Group. Ashley also has the GitHub OSPO repo, our organization within GitHub. Lots of great jumpstart actions that you can pick up and hey, how do I coordinate the health of my project, staleness, and various things that are really useful to open source program offices. From the security perspective, I think there are some questions asked about how to secure by default. So one of the programs that we're working on right now on the OpenSSF side is called the Open Source Project Security Baseline. And the idea there is that we should be able to get things that are secure by default, not just the repositories, but the organizational health across. There's heavy, GitHub focus. I think obviously for a lot of people, they're spending a lot of time on GitHub, but it is applicable to other code forges. And what's really cool about this, it's a control framework, right? And we're building tools around that control framework. What's really great about it is if you are scared about the CRA, if you care about NIST standards, if you, I'm trying to think of SSDF, a few other acronyms that you're like, oh, these are big and scary, and I have to understand pages and pages of regulations that I don't really have time to do. Really smart security people have taken the time to break that down into the control framework, and they show you exactly how it binds to each of these regulations and what subsection that's in it. So like take a look at baseline.openssf.org. And that'll help you out on some of that secure by default stuff, but also the having an example of showing people how to do it correctly, right? So having that template repo of like, here's how you start an open source project, your contributor health files, your security MDs, your list of maintainers, how to contact people. Make sure that you're setting an example from the OSPO perspective of how to do it correctly, so people can just clone that repo and pick it up from there.
The other thing I hear with that question being asked, and definitely in the way that sometimes I need to interpret it internally in my organization, is how do I politely tell this engineer that the current way they work is wrong for an open source project? And a great example is I had to teach an engineer why force pushing to a repo is not good. Of course, that's not always going to be the case with their usual workflows internally or things that they do on products, but introducing them and enlightening them around branch protection was something that was actually a really great day. And it's these little practices that we try and use in a trust but verify approach, and again, from the org level, setting certain kind of boundaries that way, but getting them to also discover how a possible limitation that they didn't realize that they had and how they can actually work to then be more aligned with best practices. That takes a bit longer in terms of like that effort and time, but it is really worth then getting those kinds of engineering teams on side to help change their workflow in the way they think about working in the open.
And I wanted to talk also about what happens when this doesn't go well. So when I first joined GitHub a little over 4 years ago, it was completely the Wild West. Like when I joined, there was open source everywhere, thousands of organizations, abandoned repos. There was no sense of what was currently active, what was maintained, had they gone through any process in the past. And so we created a program called Durable Ownership of Open Source, and we still use that today. So first we took inventory of the sprawl. We collected on spreadsheets organization names, who might be responsible for those who's still at GitHub, all the repos, what are they tied to, any information we could, and we formalized that. We have tooling now that if anybody goes outside of the release process, we can hopefully catch them. If they've created something, a new organization they haven't told us about, a repo, we can say, hey, we saw you did this thing, tell us more about it. And now we have a registry where we have an inventory of all the orgs. We do every 6 months an audit to check in and see, is that team still around? So those tools have really helped us keep on top of the sprawl and make sure we're checking if people are going outside the process. We're at GitHub, everyone knows how to go and open a public repo. We don't gate that. So it is helpful. We try not to shame, we try to carrot. We want them to follow the right process. It helps us recognize them. It helps the community too. That's worked pretty well for us. So you should also think about what tools you might use. You could start with spreadsheets just to get that inventory and find out what's out there if you haven't already.
So also trying to, to something that Natali was mentioning, like I think the user education of, like these individual instances like repo to repo management, but also getting to helping like catalyze those conversations by like forcing people to do the right thing, right? So organizational policies that you can enforce on the GitHub enterprise level or on, insert code forge here, right? Why can't I force push to this repo? It's because it's enforced by policy on, on our enterprise. That now that we're having this conversation, let me walk you through best practices for collaborative, collaborative maintenance of this project, right?
Yeah. So similarly, we also went through a GitHub cleanup effort, consolidated all of our GitHub orgs, and we found there were many, and also locked down to force them, to prevent everyone from being able to publish a new project. But we didn't want to be that bottleneck all the way, so we still have org owners who are closer to product, so they're actively involved. We're not the gatekeepers to that extent, but not everyone can do it, and they do have to go through checks of people who are more informed of what is better practice, I'll say. Additionally, we didn't drop in Repo Linter, which is a to-do group project. It is our tool of linting repos, which will check for those basic files as well. And did you talk about overlap with Repo Linter and some of OpenSSF?
Yeah, so I'm
project?
also, for OpenSSF, I'm also one of the maintainers of Scorecard, which is a
Brag.
project, pew, 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 which is a project that is focused on analyzing the security of your open source project or your project, right? We don't try to be the be all end all for analyzing security for your project, but it does give you some general heuristics around things that you can fix, right? So you don't have community health files. You are not using a dependency update tool. You're not pinning, your dependencies. You're not doing static code analysis, et cetera, et cetera. So it walks you through some of those problems, those common problems that we see, and also suggests some remediations. We don't get it perfect, but we are, as usual in open source, we are a small maintainer team, and PRs and feedback are absolutely welcome.
So one more thing, we talked a lot about like repo health and how to set up the structure of the repo, but we didn't talk about expectations on how you engage with the community. And so at one company, we had a review process, and part of that process was educating people who wanted to release new projects of our expectations. Like, is it actually useful for the community? Does a project already exist that you can contribute to instead of releasing a new project? Like, what are your engagement expectations? Do you have adequate support internally, like at least to get it up and running? How many maintainers are there going to be, right? So those questions we also asked to let them know that just because you release a project, you still can't just leave it to the wind, right? And if you do want to just release something cool, then notify the community that this is not actively maintained. Hey, like, I had a good idea. I want to share my idea with the community, and put it in the README that, like, there is no expectation of engagement from us because we are not actively supporting this, but we just want to share it with the community.
I think that conversation is, I know Anna's like, we're trying to do the next question. No. I think that conversation around like the technical components, I got to say that's the easy part. Like, we have, like, people have built tools. There are tools like you can wrap in, bash script, duct tape that will eventually get you where you need to do, run in a GitHub action. Someone has done the work. You just need to find the right combination of tools. I would say the hardest part of doing the open source program management stuff is when you are a project maintainer or steering committee member, or speaking in public to people in general, right? And getting to the point where they're like, hey, so I was maintaining this project, and like, so this weird thing happened on this mailing list, or someone asked me this, they said something disrespectful, and like managing the people aspect is so much harder. So like, we have, for example, communication guidance at Bloomberg, right? So you can go to, like, here are the things that you should and shouldn't do now that you are part of this project, or now that you are a maintainer of this project that we own, right? Just to give people like a step in the right direction. It's not perfect, and like, it's really going to be dependent on situation, but I would say that the people aspect of it is much harder than the technical components.
If the person who asked this question wants to raise the hand, you get a free
books.
Oh, okay. So for the next one. Okay, next question. Do you see an OSPO as complementary to other parts of the organization, for instance, security, developer relations? Do you unlock that collaboration? Do you have examples that you can share?
Yes, so at Cisco, the OSPO actually sits now alongside the developer relations org that we have. It's called Cisco DevNet. That org does very specifically focus majority on Cisco products. However, it was gleaned that having open source collaboration closer to DevNet would actually help with a lot more of the open source focus that Cisco is pushing, specifically in the AI space. And so being able to have our DevRel folks speak to the projects that we're working on, to the people that are helping steward those projects, us and the OSPO, was really beneficial. So the DevRel OSPO kind of synergy is alive and well in Cisco. I think it may be alive and well at GitHub, perhaps as well. So, and on top of that, the OSPO at Cisco actually sits within the R&D org as well. And we do that so that we can have not only broad focus across Cisco, but it can also be, if we choose, work as like a consultancy to go out into other organizations because we aren't tied to a specific department's OKRs, goals, metrics, etc. So we can really go out and act as that consultancy branch. But again, it does mean that being in R&D, it does mean that sometimes, we're working on this shiny new thing, and then we give it away to the department that's going to take it over, and now we change after a few months. So that might not be the best fit for OSPOs that want to remain steady and focused on a specific thing for a very long time. But we are happy to kind of be up and adaptive.
So I think really it comes down to that spirit of collaboration and our ability to kind of reach into the org. So I'll use another Cisco example, right? So we spent time on doing. Initially the team had put out kind of holding statement around the usage of the usage of GitHub Copilot, right, and whether or not we should be doing that, and this evolved into somehow I eventually became one of the co-authors of the company's generative AI policy, right? And this evolved into like conversations with legal, conversations with engineering and marketing and comms and HR because of like the implications of using AI around HR specific functions, right? So like really interesting conversations, and the reason they came to us was because we were in charge of speaking to how a tool that's kind of used on the open source should be used internally, right? So they knew that we were people who could be trusted with the conversation across the org, and that's why they got pulled in, right? I think there's a common thread of people talking about kind of like the AI PO or OSPOs that should or should not be involved in kind of like the AI conversation, and I think there's a commonality with some of those threads because of the fact that we can reach out to the org. Obviously, often they are the same stakeholders that we need to speak to. So
I've seen OSPOs work well in pretty much any group: security, legal, IT, engineering. At GitHub, we're in DevRel. When I led Yahoo and Verizon, we were in CTO, Chief Architect. The only one that hasn't might be like sales revenue, because more than likely you're tied to sales goals and metrics that may not be ideal for an OSPO. Just depends on the nature of the business. If you have support or sales on top of open source projects, perhaps that will work well. Otherwise, it really depends. If the primary focus of your OSPO is security, it might work out really well to be tight-knit with security. But for the most part, the beauty of OSPOs is that we create those dotted lines with the organizations that we need to work with security, with legal. I've seen OSPOs even work well from within legal to roll out process and policy and manage tools within engineering. So if you're positioned in a place where you can communicate across the organization, build those relationships, it most likely doesn't matter where it is. Of course, executive sponsorship and buy-in helps within that group, but more than likely it will be DevRel, community, land, or engineering.
Yeah, so one part of the question was how do you unlock that collaboration? And what's worked for me is I do a lot of meet and greets. I'll see people, I'm fully virtual in my role, so I see people online in Slack and Teams, whatever, and I like their job seems interesting. It may have overlap, so I'll put a one-on-one in their calendar and introduce myself, say like, here's some of the spaces I work in, here's what I'm interested in, and also, can you tell me about your role? And if something sparks, then I'm like, okay, here's an overlap, maybe we can collaborate together. Most people are pretty receptive to that. Also in a previous role, I was lead for open source license compliance. And this was at a time when it was before a lot of the government policies that forced it upon companies to pay attention. And because of that, we had tooling within our OSPO for license compliance. And then security started to get involved, and they had different tooling that did the same thing, but they paid their license fees for it. And so we're like, why don't we work together? We're both interested in SBOMs now, and that sparked the conversation there. There's been other cases that are less obvious. I don't know if this is a little bit less, but with talent acquisition, for example, we go to a lot of conferences. So we've partnered with talent acquisitions, hey, come to these conferences with us. Let's hire. There's a pool of developers here. Everybody deserves an opportunity. So we'd love to have open source developers at our company. And they joined and we had that. So there's lots of opportunity. We touch every aspect of the company. So it's just bridging that gap and educating the people who are in the other spaces of where we may align.
So,
yeah, I'd just like to plus one for the keeping in touch with people, because the work in OSPO is largely about relationships. And when I was working at Equinix, we didn't have an official OSPO, and all it was relationships, because there was no management structure for it, but it was just people with shared or aligned interests within the organization working on OSPO adjacent or OSPO-like stuff together. So there was an open source program, and it was for giving credits to open source projects to have infrastructure, bare metal infrastructure to run their CI/CD on and things like that. And so that was actually run through DevRel, because it generally had the skills to do that kind of interaction. But we also had links into engineering and links into legal. And yeah, I think having that, if you can figure out who your stakeholders are and keep in a regular rhythm with them, because you don't want them to only come and talk to you when there's a problem, or even worse, they don't tell you if there's a problem. So you have to be checking in regularly. It's like with a friend. You have to be checking in regularly with the beat of what's going on in their life, so that when something is starting to go a bit sideways, you're there and you already know the history. You don't have to do a catch up, and you can be well placed to know where they're at and act quickly and intervene with small changes rather than letting it get to a really bad state.
So calling back to the whole the Gil fear, love, and money thing, which I'd love to reference. I think it's really important to be helpful to people. I think you're at an open source conference, so you're kind of familiar with the concept. But the being able to show the cost of the OSPOs are insurance sometimes, right? Being able to show the cost of this thing not happening. What is the cost of another log4j, right, situation in your company, right? I guarantee it's not the cost of your open source engineers, your entire open source program office, right? The cost of buying that extra tool so that we have, that we're able to see a few meters ahead, right? I think it's really important to be able to structure some of those conversations in addition to catching up and hey, what's on your wish list? What do your objectives look like for this year, right? And try to find the way that you can dial into those. And it's really about being helpful to them. I can save you money. I can save you infrastructure costs. I can save you engineering costs, etc. Right.
So we are only 4 minutes left. Who wants to, raise their hand? The one that asked the question. If not, that's fine. Okay. So I think I've seen a few questions on security, but because we only have time for one question, I'm going to skip those because... But
Stephen wouldn't stop talking.
No.
You can catch me afterwards. If you...
As we were mentioning, in the OSPO book, there is an entire chapter on security that was developed in collaboration with the Open Source Security Foundation. OpenSSF comes, yeah. So they shared a lot of tools and best practices and scorecards. And I feel though if you take not just the physical copy, in the TODOgroup.org website, there is the PDF version, there is the online version. You can contribute to the next version of this living document. And you can, most of them, answer the questions that I'm reading here. And I'm going to end this with the last question, that is, how do you balance investing in risk management with innovation, both in external and internal communications and in strategic roadmaps? And I think this can be more like a wrap-up. Last question.
The Cisco OSPO we collaborate very, very closely with our legal team. They call the Open Innovation Legal Team. And with both of our groups together, we often have a good heads up on what the big strategic initiatives and pushes internally are happening at Cisco, so that we can go over, start collaborating, making those connections, and start helping them achieve the big bang initiative that they want to achieve. A real big example of this recently, again in the world of AI, Cisco released an AI model under Cisco Foundation AI, and the OSPO and Open Innovation Legal did everything they could to help that initiative, to kind of push as much as we could on the priority end, so that that collaboration was better next time, but also because it was clear strategically that this was something very, very important across the business. So being able to clock into, with other teams or maybe through your own leadership chain, what are those big across the business strategic initiatives that are really important, and how can you get involved? That's really something that, again, takes some of your time away from maybe some of the usual other OSPO stuff that you're doing, but is super, super beneficial. And we were able to help them kind of get off the ground pretty quickly, so that there was a lot more momentum with wanting to help across the rest of the business in this specific initiative. So be included into what the business cares about, by those connections that we were talking about before, that you're making and talking with a lot of other business units, super important.
I at this point, like, we can't ignore open source. We're all using it. Our companies are. I think there's some stat, 97% of companies use and rely on open source. Like, I don't believe there's actually 3% that doesn't. Like, I think that's just ignorance. So there is a risk associated with open source. That's why we have OSPOs and people that want to look after reducing that risk in many different formats. So around it, it depends like how you want to de-risk, but make it easy for engineers to do the right thing. Don't make it hard. I was chatting with someone yesterday from a research institution, and their lawyers are really locked down around signing CCLAs and ICLAs, and I came from Yahoo and Verizon, and the lawyers were like, no one can sign this without us reviewing each line. And at GitHub, it was a breath of fresh air. Like, they're like, oh, anybody can sign the ICLA, anybody can sign the CCLA. Like, we have a process to manage it, though. But if you make it easy for people to contribute back, they're more likely to do the right thing. If you make it easy for the checklist, not 80 things they have to go through that takes weeks, hopefully they're going to do the right thing then, rather than it takes months and months and months to go and put your code out there. So my recommendation is that make it easy so that they're not going around and avoiding the process.
Let engineers create, right?
Yes.
Like, instead of putting a burden to them.
Yeah, and I'll say oftentimes we act as that escalation point when they are getting blocked by the gatekeepers within the company. And because of where we sit, we're able to speak the language of both sides, right? Oftentimes you'll see OSPOs are made up of different functions. You'll have engineers and dev advocates and program managers, whatever it is, on the same team. And we have that ability to be that bridge internally between our developers who want to innovate and just not be blocked, and all the people who want us to be protected and want the company to be protected. So yeah, oftentimes we'll figure out how to make it work, and sometimes have our executives accept the risk. Like, risk is there. Sometimes it is what it is. And we can still move forward accepting that risk because the benefit is stronger than the risk that we see. So we can help to have those conversations.
So how to do it? Time, patience, data. I think, so one, be gentle with yourselves. Like, the first time you run an OSPO or think about these initiatives, they're not easy to do. They're not easy to jumpstart. Some people won't understand the value of it until you build that mass of willing, participants and allies, right? So it takes time, and be okay with that. You're going to fail on a few things to start. Thinking about the strategic versus the tactical, you are going to spend a decent chunk of your time on the tactical. Sometimes someone's like we're publishing a project, and you're like, guess what? My entire day is going to be this. My entire next 2 weeks or something are going to be based around this. But be able to zoom out and like collecting that data is important. Being able to zoom out and like identify a pattern. Well, the reason that this took 2 weeks was because of blah, 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 blah. If I had talked to this engineering manager, this director over here, and this guy in legal, we would have been able to have an opportunity to streamline some of this process, right? So the strategic initiative becomes, I need to get these people on side to get this done, right? And you spend a lot less time on the technical and more on the strategic.
We are out of time, but
Last thoughts?
Last
Okay.
thoughts, yeah.
So I had a conversation yesterday, and I think this story actually also resonates with this question. Not only is it internal, but also external. Communications, OSPOs are the bridge between internal and external, right? So there was a time when our developers wanted to use a project that legal did not approve of. And so instead of pushing back on our internal legal, we pushed back on the external legal of that company, and they changed their licenses. And so like being able to have that community feedback to the folks who control those projects, because we would love to use them, they want us to use them. And having that conversation of why we're not using it, the voices of the community also have power too, and so we can remove risk externally too.
That's a very conflicting final thought. I have thoughts to share with you after.
Last thought?
No.
My last thought is please read the to-do book, and I would love to get your feedback on like how does it read. We're going to do another version of it. Like what would you like to see in it? Like were there bits that didn't make sense even? Did you see a typo? We have a repo for that, and there's an issue already open on the repo where you can add your feedback on the book. So I'd love to get that.
Yeah, I want to just highlight Alice's amazing work on the OSPO book. She has absolutely project managed the production of this. It really is thanks to a lot of the really great work that you've done that we've gotten it to where it is today. Thanks, Alice.
And also wanted to mention there is one last member here that wasn't able to make it. I think she did an amazing job in the Ask Anything in Open Source Summit North America, Brittany Stennis. So also big, huge kudos to her. Oh yes! Oh my goodness! And an even amazing person, Gerkund, also from Steering Committee member, that wasn't able to make it. And oh my God, I'm not even jet lagged, but I'm so sorry for the mess. And you can grab your copy of the OSPO book, the few lefts that are there. So if you don't have one, hurry up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.